Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming out on this potentially rainy evening.
Yes, hello, and thank you for coming out on this potentially rainy.
So he's a very agreeable guest and host. I hope I'm not speaking too closely to the mic. I just want to say to all of you, I'm sure you are here because you love his writing, but I really love Simon's writing, and it was such a treat, but it's also so overwhelming to read his books, because I reread several before today, and he writes with such potent emotion. You know, everything is so condensed. You end up feeling more than you're used to feeling when you read Simon. And one of the things I was telling him earlier tonight is that when I read his novels and his short stories, it makes me, both want to be in love and very afraid of it, because he shows that it's an emotion that a strong emotion is not free of danger. I think a line that you use in this wonderful new novel, The Illusion of Separateness, is it love is a kind of violence? What was the line?
Yeah, that's it.
Yes. That's when one of the characters sets fire to her house when she thinks her husband is dead. So I hope that isn't a spoiler for you guys. But I wanted to start just with a kind of a bleak question, because I think we may have a few stragglers. So I wanted to start with something that wouldn't cut into the basics, which was just to talk a second about the title of your book, because you make it the epigraph, The Illusion of Separateness, and it also reappears in the novel as the name of an art exhibition that a girl named Amelia is curating. And the epigraph goes, "We are here to awaken from the illusion of separateness." And it's by, I think, a monk named Thich Nhat Hanh, who's very interested in mindfulness. And so I just wondered, what does this mean to you, the illusion of separateness, and why did you choose that epigraph?
I think, can everyone hear me okay? Okay, I'll use my, it always reminds me of Japanese ice cream. But I think if you look at it, it's a pretty bad idea, right?
I wouldn't do it.
Okay. And it would also look
it would look a little creepy, Simon.
Yeah. Which takes us on to the Buddhist quote by Thich Nhat Hanh, which is, somebody left a magazine at my house called Shambhala Sun, which is a spiritual publication, and I was looking through it, and there were some quite interesting articles. And one of them was about how, for the first time, the universe is conscious of itself through us, which I thought was quite a profound thing to say. And the other thing was an article about the illusion of separateness, that we're here to overcome the illusion of separateness. The way that William Blake talks about how we are here, I think in his Songs of Innocence, we're here to bear the beams of love. Bear them meaning that it's actually a burden, that anything good in our lives is simultaneously a blessing and a burden. So I suppose this book was me exploring that quote, and also, if you'll permit me to talk about the idea that a friend had just broken up with someone, and if you've broken up with someone, it's quite tough sometimes, because they're alive, but you can't be with them. In some ways it's easier if they're dead, though they probably wouldn't agree. So a friend had just broken up with someone, and he really claimed that he really, really loved her, and I believed him. And I thought to myself, we were walking and talking, and we walked past someone who was homeless, who was asking for money, and we sort of ignored her, though you always feel a little stab, And so I thought to myself, 25 years from now, he might still be carrying this anger inside him. And, it might have ruined his life. He might have lost his job. He might have, descended into alcoholism. And he might walk past a homeless woman who's asking for money because she's hungry, and he might ignore her because he's just sort of blinded by his feelings. And it could be her, couldn't it? she could have descended into alcoholism and had a pretty tough time after they broke up. So this person who's sort of controlled his life for 25 years, who he wants to love but she wouldn't give him the opportunity, is right there. So then I thought, well, is it just our physical appearance? I mean, if she looked different. So it just got very complicated, and I tried to talk to people about it like I'm talking to you, and ended up just like laughing because it made no sense.
Perhaps easier to do in a novel.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you write too, I think maybe one of the reasons we write is to figure things out in ways we can't through thought.
There is a... what you were saying about his feeling as if she were dead, only she was alive, but he didn't have access. It reminded me of a line in your last book. His last novel was called, I guess, Everything Was Beautiful After It Began. Everything beautiful began after.
That's it. Don't worry, I do the same thing.
Well, I mean, it is
it's
sort
not
of
like it's
poetic.
yeah.
You do have poetic titles.
Long titles.
Yes. Well, so anyway, the line I was just thinking of is where the woman said, loneliness is feeling like you're the only person in the world but being surrounded by everyone else. So even though you're surrounded, you feel solitary. It's interesting that you brought up Blake and that we were saying these poetical things, because one of the comments that I like best that someone's made of your writing is he says that it was Roger Rosenblatt, and he said
he's a very good writer.
He's an excellent writer.
And he has a kayak as well. I think he wrote an article on kayaking.
Do you kayak?
No, my wife and I went paddleboarding this summer, and it was quite good fun. I mean, I thought it was just going to be like your concussion, like getting bitten by things, your swimming trunks coming off, and then getting washed up on a beach with thousands of people, like a Ouija photograph. But it didn't happen. It was pleasant, and we didn't fall in, and...
Oh, well, I'm glad you survived the foray into athleticism. But you are an athlete. You were a football player, right?
Yeah, in the most liberal sense of the word play. Yeah, it's true. I used to play, I was a tailback, and I was at a college where they, I think, foolishly ran the wishbone formation. But there's a former football player must be laughing, and they figured out that the best way to use my athletic ability was for me to hide in the pocket of the quarterback and then bite anyone who gets too close to him. So that's that.
So Roger Rosenblatt had said that your fiction has the power and resonance of poems.
Yeah.
And I've always thought that too. And I wondered, do you write? Have you ever written poetry?
Yeah, I have, and I stopped.
It? Mm-hmm.
I don't think so. I mean, it's just not very good. I mean, I like playing the hand harp, but it doesn't sound like music to anyone but me. So I think that when I read poets that I love, I realize just how inept I am as a poet.
I often think that short stories have something in common with poems, because each story can really strongly bring out one idea. And that's true in your short fiction. What made you think that this book, Illusion of Separateness, was going to be a novel as opposed to a short story collection? Or would you say it shares ties with short story collection?
The first story I wrote was about Amelia, who's the blind character, and that was fun writing her because I was able to buy women's clothes and buy women's perfume, and I didn't try it on. Don't look at me like that. But I wanted to, and I sprayed the clothes with her perfume just to get a sense of her, because she was blind, and I almost said she is blind as though she's a living person, and so she would buy clothes through the texture of the fabric, and so that was a short story. I don't really have any plans when I start working. So when people say, before I was published and agents would ask me for a synopsis and a chapter outline, I thought, well, I suppose I'd better write the book then, because I suppose if I knew what was going to happen, I'd be too bored to continue.
So you actually like to be in a state of suspense throughout the writing process, or do you just have to get halfway along or something and then it...
Yeah, it's the opposite of life. So in life, I'm quite a regular person. A-regular, not irregular. I suppose my wife's here, so she might say I'm irregular. But, I keep my toothbrush in a certain place. I like to get up at a certain time. I put all my socks in one little place. And but in fiction, I like to really sometimes just almost rip the pages up or just, throw words down and be a little irreverent.
Yeah, to own it, sort of.
Yeah, sort of, yeah.
You write so beautifully in the chapter about Amelia. I think we should give people an overview of the book just in case they haven't read it. This book, in a way, is linked stories, and you could... I was quite a long ways along before I realized that everyone was going to end up connecting to everyone else in a surprising way, which, has this cumulative force. You keep on being gathered in by how people's lives touch other people's lives.
It was a surprise to me, too.
Well, now I know. But Amelia is the blind granddaughter of a man, a U.S. airman who is shot down over France in World War II, named John. And I didn't realize that connection until very late, so I am, again, sorry for the spoiler, but because Simon's brilliance is in the words, in the prose, in the lyricism of the prose, I don't feel I'm being too destructive if I tell plot points. Do you feel I'm being destructive?
Keep going, I like it.
Okay. All right. But so I wondered, I know the answer, so I won't be disingenuous. This man, John Bray, in the story, is one of the storylines. He's got a wife named Harriet, who's American, who thinks that he's been shot down and is dead when she's a young bride. A little French child playing in the shell of the shot-down plane in his French farm village of Saint-Pierre goes and plays in that shell and finds a picture of that lady, of Harriet, which ends up being held but not understood for what it is by that blind granddaughter later when she's curating an exhibition for the blind at MoMA. So that was a very haunting moment. But I read, and hadn't known this, that your inspiration for John Bray and his wife Harriet not only came from a real-life couple named Knapp, but that couple, they're your wife's grandparents?
Yeah, that's correct. When you first start dating someone, you'll agree to anything. And I said, what are you doing next weekend? And she said, I'm going to see my grandmother. And I said, I'll drive you. Because I'm one of the foolish people who keeps a car in New York. So I drove her up to Connecticut, and we chatted on the way, and it's true that he'd gone missing after being shot down. And I found all the records, actually. I contacted museums and libraries in Germany, and of course the War Museum in London, and the Holocaust Museum here in the US too. So I was managed to get a lot of different documents and paperwork, and I even found the record of the crash from the Nazi point of view. So and it said where and everything. And what's very interesting is that all the Nazi documents were in a very peculiar font. And Mussolini too. I think fascists must love weird fonts. So because the fascists in Italy had all these bizarre fonts in the 30s. And anyway, and I put a booklet together and I gave it to her. And of course, the person I was dating at the time, whose grandparents these people are, I married. So if that's not taking my research seriously, then the thing that that story is based around, the artifact, and I've grown up loving artifacts because I grew up on in a coastal farming community.
In Wales, right?
Yeah, in Wales. Yeah, when I say to children I'm from Wales, they just open their mouths. And I mean, imagine I'll take bits of seaweed out of my hair. And so bits of aircraft would wash up from time to time, the wing of a Messerschmitt, or part of an American plane, and just hundreds of thousands of these aircraft were shot down. And so the beach was sort of an impromptu museum in a way. And so my friends and I grew up loving artifacts. A field would be ploughed, and then some Saxon head hunting tool would. And so all these things we'd sort of collect or we'd look at. And so when I found a telegram at my wife's grandmother's living facility in Connecticut, which is great, by the way. You have to be a certain age to check in, but they've got a cafeteria, they've got medication, they've got karaoke, they've got mini golf. So only like 40 years to go. And I found a telegram that said, Western Union, of course, "Dear Annette, just back from the most fabulous vacation on the continent. Love, Bert." And of course he'd been missing for almost a year. And this was his, "I'm alive" telegram.
There's the picture of it on page 75. And that was...
Yeah, I'm going to do that too, Liesl.
Okay. Good.
We can give it to them in stereo.
Okay. So flash it around.
That's actually not the original because it got lost. So I have a 1957 Remington travel writer, which is not a travel writer. It's heavy and you'll get injured trying to carry it. Portable typewriters are not portable. Anyway, so I bought some Western Union slips off eBay, and I typed it up. I sort of copied it from what I could remember. And what's funny though now is that she thinks it's the real one. So, we all have our illusions, don't we? Why not?
You have a wonderful line. The first book of Simon's I ever read was his book, The Secret Lives of People in Love, which I read on a plane and at some point just burst into tears, disconcerting the person next to me. But it was the story where they hide is a mystery. Where a little boy, his mother's died, and he's being comforted by a Sikh who is showing him that his father is mourning, and teaching the boy to feel his mother's still there. But there's a line that the Sikh tells the little boy. He says, "Memory needs all the help it can get, and things are sometimes like keys." And when you wrote that, it made me think of artifacts, the way that you will pick on a certain object that unlocks your story. I mean, sure, the telegram was that, but the photograph of Harriet on the beach that the child finds in the plane ends up... I really want you to read a little bit of that section. Is that okay? Or
yeah, or you could just keep talking. I mean, you're saying such... I'm joking, I'll read a section, but it's such nice things. What's also interesting is that a friend of mine, my mentor actually, who lives in Sag Harbor, who's a complete recluse, and she doesn't like to see anyone. When I call her, all she says, she picks up the phone and she says, "I don't know who you are, but I can't talk to you." She barely leaves the house. And I did manage to take her out for lunch to the veterans, there's a VFW, and I managed to get her in the car to the VFW for hamburgers. And I said, "What's on your mind, Barbara? Why are you so miserable?" And she looked at me and said, "Because I'm old and there's no God." And so I thought I won't ask her anything until dessert. And I said, "What do you think about these days?" And she said, "I try not to think." She said, "The real self lies below thought, beneath the trash heap of what's happened to us." Isn't that interesting? Well, she was with Carson McCullers when Carson McCullers died, and she would, with cigarette in one hand, glass of bourbon in the other, and Barbara would read her passages from Carson's books, and Carson McCullers would say, "Oh my goodness, read that again. I just love that bit." And Barbara explained that it wasn't narcissism, it was the fact that Carson didn't really feel like she'd written it, that she couldn't really remember most of the stuff she'd written. And I feel kind of like that too, that what I'm writing has already been written in another way by someone in the 1500s or the 1300s, and then when I'm long dead, years from now, hopefully, and someone else will write exactly that line, but in a different way. Do you see what I mean? So it's nice that I get to do
impulse.
that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm one of the people that gets to do that in this lifetime. So I quite like that. So I'll read a section now from the children's part. I know there's Lego in this. I know you like that. So
I'm fond of Lego.
Unless you step on it. Have you ever stepped on Lego with bare feet? It's not pleasant.
And just to set it up, this is a little boy named Sébastien who's kind of in love with a girl in his school whose name is Haley. I can't imagine that in French. Haley? I mean, how would you say that? Anyway.
I probably should have thought that through a little more.
Sorry. Anyway. But so he's going to he's at the section is in between school and also when he's thinking of going to show this little girl he has a crush on, the Hulk.
Yeah, it's Barbara told me once, she said, you never finish a book, you just abandon it. And she said it gets to a point where it's good enough to publish, and then if you rewrite it, you're really just changing it. It's a different book, you're not really making it any better. And so this chapter probably should have been cut, but I just loved having it in so much.
Wait, why should it have been cut?
Well, the thing is, that's what's so great about...
We can read it later and skip it.
Well, no, that's what I have a generous publisher who allowed me to keep it in, but when from a technical point of view, it didn't really work. But isn't that wonderful that publishing is an industry where when things don't work, sometimes they're better? Normally you have to be drunk for that statement to be true. So let me read a little. So do
you want me to show you the pages?
Oh, no, I have it. Sebastian looks out the classroom window, but doesn't see passing cars or brown leaves like claws on the sidewalk attached to nothing. He can reach for things without touching them. Thinking and desire are one. After school, he will take Haley to see the iron skeleton he found in the woods. He wants to find a corner of the playground and hug her all lunchtime. Hug her so tightly that she becomes a part of him. Instead, later on, she'll trail him through the woods to the skeleton behind the farm. There she will love him the way he is seen in films, especially the ones he watches with Grandma on Saturday afternoon when the room flickers and the music is heavy. The actors' faces are soft and grey. It begins with a single dance and then a telephone call. Unwashed sheets hang in the sky. They smell of salt from the sea. It's been raining since early morning, but will turn to snow when the bell rings. Sebastian awoke to rain on the window like 1,000 eyes. The wind was gusting, birds blown off course, teddies blown out of bed. They all have names and behave differently. He likes to hold one at night. It gets him through. The lights in the classroom were always bright and warm. The class mice, Tick and Tock, are sleeping. Their fur is tight. Sebastian's hair sticks up in the morning. Only water keeps it down. He likes to draw for 10 minutes before school. Sometimes when he sharpens his colouring pencils, the lead breaks off and he's back where he started. His mother shouts at him to get dressed, but he's looking at the hollow socket. He can feel what's not there. His drawing is unfinished, the outline of another world. He feels this one by imagining others. Play is where he recognises himself, closing his bedroom door on one life, because there are so many. His mother shouts at him to get dressed. He indignantly stands, driven by the engine of his heart. The tyranny of school, the shuffle of toast and the scrape of butter, a kettle driving ghosts into the world. Resting his feet on the dog's back under the table, the dog won't move as long as crusts or bits of sausage appear from time to time. It's so early, but his father is already out on the tractor. The school corridor smells of milk and coats, the sound of boots taken off. Sometimes socks come off too. Like children, they don't want to leave home. The fear of being lost, the fear that never goes away and cannot be dispelled. Then the bell and a list of names called out. Sebastian knows it by heart and whispers it in bed like a prayer of parentheses. Desks opening and closing like mouths, scribbled messages on the back of the seat in front of him. He feels the teacher's unhappiness. It's in how she stands, how she moves, her hair, her clothes. The lesson will end one day. A ringing bell means glory, freedom, something to run for. He can go home and sit at the table with nothing to do. He can venture into the woods and look for animals. He can visit the skeleton and drum on its hard skin. He can set up his Lego train and lay people underneath to fix the engine. He can close his curtains and put his flashlight in a sock. Moonlight spills across the train yard. Little plastic men and women go home to hot plastic dinners. They walk quickly to keep warm. They're like us, but smaller. They're like us, with things in their pockets, and good moods and bad moods, and spontaneous moments of love and cruelty. They yawn. They too lie awake, unable to sleep, going over arguments or unraveled by desire. They give birth to plastic babies whose fathers work in the train yard. Even at night, the trains must be repaired. Nobody knows why it broke down in the North Pole at midnight. No one knows. Perhaps a miracle will occur before supper, and Haley's family will not freeze in the Arctic tundra of white bedsheet and aluminum foil lake. Sebastian looks out the classroom window. The teacher is talking, but says nothing. Her heart is asleep. His heart is asleep. The children's hearts are asleep and will remember nothing.
Beautiful, thank you.
You're welcome. I was going to say, now you have a way to build your own Lego Arctic tundra. It's just a sheet over like some cushions, aluminum foil for like frozen water.
Yes. I'll have to get the special Arctic
If you have
tundra
children,
kit.
you'll be their hero if you can make this happen.
It's so interesting the way you write about children and grandparents and great-grandparents and teenagers, every single generation. I mentioned how moved I was by the Sikh who befriends the little child. But in this novel, in The Illusion of Separateness, it's astonishing the impact that a little boy whose mother is a nurse, his name is Danny, visits a German whose face has been blown half off during the war. And he sort of stops in because his mother doesn't have someone to sit him at home. And he comes and sees that man every day. And the man, who's very friendly and quiet, realizes that the boy needs help learning to read and teaches him. And that boy grows up to become a film producer in Hollywood. And there's a moment in the book when the grown, successful movie guy is visiting his agent's wife, who's in the hospital, probably mortally ill. And she says, "You should get in touch with that man." And he said, "Oh, he's probably dead by now." And the woman says, "But if he isn't, he will remember you." I'm trying to find the one. Oh, here it is. She says, "If he's alive, he will remember you. I guarantee it meant more to him than you think." And of course, as we know from reading this book, throughout his life, that interaction the man had with that child was the important emotional bond of his adult life. So, when you write about this, what are your goals? Why does the generational connection matter so much to you in your writing?
I don't really know. It's actually great being a writer because you can say things like, "Man, I have no idea." But if you were working in a corporate job, you'd have to come up with something. So it's an excellent question, though, and that's why I don't have an answer. Because I think that I don't really think that much, actually. I mean, I just sort of sit down and try not to impose too much of myself on the page, and I just let the story tell itself, and it kind of comes out the way it wants to. And sometimes I do have some control where I think, well, you need to rein this character in a bit to make room for another character. But really, it's sort of like corralling at a circus, rather than... and all the characters are based on people I've sort of met briefly, long enough where I got a sense of them, but not long enough where their own personality would impose itself on the work.
I wanted to ask, sorry, because the question sounds like it was unanswerable. So
it's a good question,
so surprising. Well, it's so consistent with you, and you're not that old a writer, and you've been writing everything
Botox.
I've written about Botox. Everything I've read by you. There's the child characters are given equal focus, and you're not twee with them, but you see them. But there's a moment that was so surprising in this novel where this German man who's had a gun thrust in his mouth, who's lying in a ditch, and has actually been trampled by the Englishman, who's the grandfather. Well, never mind. It's all I'm making it sound like melodrama, and it's not. It's very slow and controlled, and organically elapses. But the German man, when going to a house that's been burnt, discovers a baby who will appear as another character, and it was so surprising to see him tenderly saving that baby. It was just, I just wondered, was that a story you actually read in your Second World War research? And I also wanted to know whether you've written about the Second World before, and whether that had been an abiding interest or something that just became part of this book that surprised you.
It was the Second World War was of interest to me because growing up it was a shadow over my family. My grandfather fought, and my mother's family had been forced to move around, and the general upheaval caused by the war is still taking place now. I mean, a lot of our current problems, things you read in the newspaper, you can trace back the roots to people moving around and during or after Second World War, and as a child we all have those defining moments where our innocence starts to, ice cracking. I remember my grandfather was supposed to take me to the to a tank museum actually, and I was really excited, and I was probably about 8 years old, and he didn't show up, and then my parents called, and my grandmother said he's locked himself in the bathroom and he won't come out. And this big, strong man who smoked in the car and in my face, and was always giving me mints, he just was reduced to just a ruin of a man. And so I realized then that I felt guilty for being so enthusiastic. The research what's interesting is the research is really, it's so terrible, because just when you think it can't get any worse, it just gets worse. And I just have massive respect and admiration for the people who just sacrificed their lives. I mean, it sounds like it's a cliche, I know, but it's also so not a cliche, because it's such an uncliched thing to do, but you see empty seats when I teach, and I see empty seats in the classroom. I think, these are the people who weren't born because they were murdered, or because of
my goodness.
And so the research was, I don't think I'll write another book set during World War II, just because it sort of takes a toll. Though saying that, I'm much more appreciative now, and I've become a lot more laid back, because I get into a minor car accident, who cares, who gives a shit? Doesn't matter really.
At least I wasn't in the trenches.
Yeah, but and I think that it's funny, we have such a militaristic culture, yet in some ways we treat veterans so poorly, nowadays. So
I wanted to ask you about the foreign settings that pop up in your books always. This book is set in Germany, France, England, America. Sussex is England, right? Do you get to Scotland in it, or is Danny just from Scotland?
I've never been to Sussex, but somebody told me it's sort of ritzy and people have big mansions there, so I just used it. I think I may have typed it into Google, and as always, pornography came up.
Don't erase the magic. Let us think that you're intimately acquainted with East Sussex. No, but so also the last book was Greece and Italy, and you yourself are from Wales but have lived in America. I mean, why are foreign settings so? Well, first of all, do you think you have a different perspective or vantage to write because you're from no place and every place, or why do you like to use so many different countries in your writing? Now that I'm almost 40, I feel like I can give you an honest answer, and it's because growing up I never really fit in anywhere, because I grew up in a rural Welsh town, but of course I don't particularly look what you'd think a Welsh person would look like, and so my whole life people were saying, where are you from, and I never knew what to say, because I'm from here, and I'm always from here, and we're all from here. So I had this sort of lingering sense of anonymity, or not really knowing who I was or where I was from.
And
which made you identify with everybody? What do you?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, and I traced my family roots back, and pretty soon, if you've ever traced your family tree, you find that someone was born 15 months after someone was killed, and so there you go. It's in someone else's tree that you'll never find, and so I just gave up. I got to China, I got to all kinds of places, but then I just gave up.
That's wonderful. There was a line. There was a line that I wanted to mention from your Beautiful Began After book, because you talked about how you felt your writing in a way was of a piece with other people's writing, and someone reading someone else would impart some of your thoughts later on, maybe. And it made me think of this beautiful line that the character George, who's a hard-drinking Kentuckian archaeological linguist, comes up with. He says he loves to read literature, old literature, because he sees it as a thread running through humanity, keeping it together so that we may know a person's innermost feelings without ever having known them personally. And I love to think that that's what you're doing.
Oh, thanks, Liesl.
But then I was also interested in the other character. There's kind of a love triangle in that earlier book. Henry and George, the other character, Henry, is also an archaeologist, but he is he's an archaeologist who specializes in human remains. And I sort of thought that's a good definition of a novelist.
That's an excellent definition of a novelist, yeah.
And, you know, so he's always going back to the artifacts and reading the people in them. Do you ever, I mean, so do you is there any of your characters that you particularly identify with? I mean, I saw you in Henry, but who knows? But then, of course, the story you told about your grandfather being too emotional to go to the Imperial War Museum ends up happening to Amelia in here.
Yeah.
Do you find yourself inhabiting your characters, or does one resonate with you more?
It's always a kind of patchwork of things, you know. Like, for instance, you know, you need a piece of furniture, I'll just go into my daughter's room and like take her chair, and you know, so you fill in things you can't imagine, you just fill in with everyday artifacts, things from real life. It's really a kind of you're just sort of cobbling something together. And the funny thing about being a writer is 99% of my working life I'm with material that I don't like, that doesn't work, that's a total mess. And then when it finally kind of gets into shape, just by going at it, you know, all the time, not every day, but and then finally it gets into shape, and then it seems like you just wrote it word for word. And that's kind of the illusion in a way, because it's really just it's really just a sort of a mess, like a Rubik. I've never been able to do a Rubik's Cube ever, except taking the stickers off. You ever done that? But then one's crooked and you get found out. And
my nephew got in trouble for doing that twice.
Who can do Rubik's Cubes?
2 Rubik's Cubes.
So it's sort of like a Rubik's Cube and then it gets into some sort of, like, you know, if you were doing construction and, you know, you spend most of your time with drywall and leaks and things not being level, and then finally on the last week when it's up and the interior design is done, you send it off. You no longer, for most of your time you're just sort of working with all the raw materials.
And then suddenly it's done and it looks as if it was always meant to be that way.
Yeah, but then you want to keep changing it. And but it's a lovely profession to have, but it's a little bit intense in terms of you're sitting in one place and you're mentally, you know, it's not like, I think there's a new desk that's a treadmill. I saw it in a magazine. I
was telling you, sitting is the new smoking. Everyone wants to be walking on a treadmill while they're writing. Susan Orlean does it. She wrote about it.
I have a book of writers at their desks, which I just bought at a thrift store at the weekend, and it's really awesome to see writers at their desks at work, and they're just like me. I feel like in many ways they don't really know what they're doing, and so if you're writing now and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, it's probably going well.
I just want to ask one quick question, then throw it open to everyone, which is, you have now been translated into 14 languages, and that's turning each of these Rubik's Cubes into a different Rubik's Cube. Have you read any of the translations? And is there, I bet you've read the French one.
Well, I struggled through it. with a lot of chocolate eclairs and cigarettes.
And I just, well, I hope you have that in any case, whatever you're reading. But have you spoken to any foreigners who've read your book in translation who have different reactions than we tend to have, or
actually,
what's been unusual?
Yeah, I do. I keep in touch with all my translators, and we swap gifts at Christmas, like just candy from our country, and I really appreciate it because it's like they're kissing people on my behalf. Do you see what I mean? And it's really their book in a way, because it's like if you read a recipe, you make something, somebody won't say, oh yeah, who wrote the recipe? You know, it's like, wow, you're a good cook. So I really feel like the translation is a really underrated art, and translators are sort of like unsung heroes of the book world. Maybe the most interesting translation story is my book is about to come out. Two of my books are about to come out in Iran. And for a long time they were rejected by the government, who said, you know, these books are not possible to be published in an Islamic state. And I mean, but Iran is full of, I mean, such wonderful literary people working in the book world, and I don't think there are any agreements, copyright agreements or anything, so they can publish what they want. So the publisher wrote to me and said, you know, there's no money and there's no copyright, and he said, so we just wrote, we want your blessing. And I thought, oh God, it's so lovely, isn't it? It's like a Hafiz poem. And so we've been communicating.
So they want your blessing but they won't tell you what it says, and it may be completely different?
Yeah, well, when I go shopping, I'm going to say, I don't have any money, but I want your blessing for this. They eventually, the translators just kept retranslating it so that there was ambiguity about certain scenes that were maybe sexual or masturbatory in nature. And I mean, you can allude to that in so many ways, you know. I mean, we spend our teenage years doing it. I mean, alluding. So it's finally, it passed, so to speak. And you know, I'd like to go down there, and I've been invited to Iran, but my wife worked in politics with Obama, so I don't think it's probably a very good idea, unless she wants to get rid of me.
Right, maybe they can come here.
Yeah, the Frankfurt Book Fair.
Didn't they have
the Great
a bunch
Equalizer.
of tents by the UN once?
Mm.
Yeah, you can be on our turf. Are there questions from our audience, or should I?
Did you want to ask? Oh, you one in the back.
If there aren't, I have plenty.
I was just curious, the character of the film producer at the end, was that based on anybody in particular from your life?
Well, actually, I was thinking of you, Gregory.
I know.
I know, that's why he said, I'm not just making this up. Yeah, Gregory, who's brooding and handsome and secretive. I've known Gregory a few years. He's a brilliant publicist, but also a friend. And you know, it's funny when you know someone and you trust them, yet you don't know the depths of they're secretive. You have any friends like that?
Gregory, does he have your blessing for his portrayal of the character?
Of course.
I gave you a nice car. I gave you a Mercedes. And I gave you a washboard stomach, which actually you probably already have. But I gave you a nice house, and beagles, 2 beagles, cashmere blankets. I think you did all right. If only it were real.
Other questions out there this evening? There's one here.
Hi, Simon.
Hi.
It's Davida.
Hi, Davida. How are you?
I'm good, and you? I wanted to know how finding love and getting married have changed or added a slant to your writing since The Secret Lives of People in Love way back when. How it's evolved you as a writer, or how it's maybe changed the way you perceive love for your characters.
It's a lovely question.
Yeah, it's a lovely question. And Davida's a very good writer, whose book I shall one day blurb, hopefully, when it's finished. First of all, marriage has given me a stability, an emotional stability, and sort of a home life that allows me really to focus on what I'm doing a bit more and not worry about not having any paper towels in the kitchen. Also, if you're a hypochondriac, being married is great because you can say to someone, you know, I think I have Ebola, and they'll pretend to take it seriously and tap your knees or something. Say, no, you definitely don't have it. So being married has its benefits, but being married, of course, to someone you deeply care about sharpens your sense of mortality as well, because one day you'll be separated. And then that's it. You'll never see them again. That'll be it. So it's actually why I wear this ring with the two skulls for my wife and daughter, because just to remind myself to be nice to them. Because one day this is what will happen. I suppose the Romans called it the memento mori, anything that reminds you you're going to die, which enhances your life. And so, on the other hand, marriage, how has it changed my view of love? Well, love is something really that I sort of work at, actually, I don't think it's that much work. My wife's here tonight. It moves along pretty harmoniously. I'm very annoying though, so she probably would have a different answer, which is why she's not allowed to have the mic, and she'll be barred from future events where we talk about this in case she tells the truth. But we got married when I was older too, when we were both, well, she's not old, but I was a bit older, so I'd calmed down a lot. I think if I'd got married in my late teens or early 20s, like a lot of the people from where I grew up, I don't think it would have been very harmonious at all. So thanks for that question.
We are just coming to the end of the time for the evening, so I wanted to extend a thanks to Simon and Liesl for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Liesl. Thanks, Liesl.
You've both been lovely. Thank you.